Bolton, our stop in Bolton. Can you
Hmm.
tell us about the Bolton Little Theater and your involvement in pantomime, such as the Lazy Bee scripts?
Yes, I can. Although Bolton Little Theatre is a community theatre group or amateur dramatics group, and they're a long running group. They've been active since the 1930s, so it's quite an established. They have a proper little theatre of their own, which is lovely,
Hmm.
and so I've been involved with them for quite a while. But the Pantos actually came out of an earlier group.
Hey, Gareth, let me stop you there for just a second. I'm noticing that the screen has locked up. Are you there?
Hello again. I thought something had happened
Okay,
because
yeah, yeah,
you
right. I,
froze.
I don't know exactly where it was, but I'm like, boy, he's not moving very much.
I think
He's
it
very
was.
still.
I think it just started. You just asked me about Bolton Little Theatre, so
Yes,
I was
yes.
just starting my answer. I'm also shocked to see we've been going at this 2 hours now.
Yeah, yeah. How are you doing? Are you hanging in there? Are you wanting to end? I've got
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm just sort of thinking. Feel free to edit any of this.
okay, yeah. Well, I'm not a fan of editing. I'm kind of lazy, and I think unless there's something hugely wrong in it, I don't think much needs to be edited. In fact, we can probably even just leave that in there. It's pretty funny. I was talking about how everybody learned how to use Zoom because of the
Mm.
pandemic, and it looks like Zoom locked up.
It
So
just heard it. It's the
yeah,
yes, the
so
hostility of
yeah.
machine.
So yeah, the Bolton Little Theater, and your involvement in pantomime.
Yes, funny enough, my involvement in pantomime started before my involvement in Bolton Little Theatre. Bolton Little Theatre is a long-running amateur dramatics group. They started in the 1930s, and they have a lovely little theatre. And I've been involved in quite a lot of plays there. And as I said at the start of this interview, I've done a lot of other roles there, as in jobs around the place too. With the pantomime, before Boston Little Theatre, I was involved in another group called Maudsley Amateur Dramatics, and they put on a pantomime every year. Pantomimes are very much the bread and butter of both amateur groups and also professional theatre. A lot of professional theatres, it's what keeps them basically in the black, basically putting on a pantomime every year. I'm aware that pantomime is kind of a British thing. I'm not sure how aware you are of pantomimes as
Well,
a.
my wife is a fan of it, and she has
Oh,
introduced me to it. So I had not been aware of it. But I would say, am I a fan of it? Yes, and it's because of her interest and what she has
mhm.
shown me. So, but I didn't know it was kind of a British thing.
I think I mean probably other countries have their variations of it, but I'm aware that the British pantomime, it's a peculiar as we know it, it's a kind of peculiar thing to the British. If you don't know what pantomime is, it's kind of like a family show, usually based on a fairy tale or a very well known story. And
Mhm.
it's a family show which is full of slapstick and comedy, and there are certain archetypes. There are certain characters that all pantomimes have. There's always an older, sort of noisy, jolly woman called the Dame, and there's always a villain, and there's usually a heroic young man played by a woman, played
Mhm.
by a leggy woman usually,
Mhm.
and similarly, the Dame tends to be played by a man. So it's quite playful. The interesting thing about pantomime is that in one level it's very formula. In that I say you have to have these characters. There are certain things that an audience comes expecting to see. There should be like a messy comedy sketch involving custard pies or similar at some point. It's going to open with a big song. It's going to close with a big song, and there are certain call and responses between the characters. The characters are usually very aware of the audience, and they're always talking to the audience. And there's a little thing where at some point, usually the villain will say something like, "I'm going to stop Aladdin. Oh, yes, I will." And then the audience goes, "Oh, no, you won't. Oh, yes, I will." So there are formula things that you've got to put into a pantomime. But at the same time, it's weirdly quite flexible in other ways. So they're a really interesting thing to write. And what had happened I was with this group called Maudsley, Amateur Dramatics, and a lot of the people who were usually involved in the pantomime had left for one reason or another. They either moved or illness or similar. So my aunt, who'd got me involved in this group, Auntie Pam, said, "Well, you're a writer. Do you want to have a go at writing the script for this year's pantomime? And I'll write it with you and we'll come." So I was really interested in that challenge. And it's something I think I'd vaguely thought about it in the past. And now here was a chance to do it. So we chose Dick Whittington, which is a well-known story in this country. I don't know if he's traveled much, but Dick Whittington is about this young boy who comes to London to find his fortune, gets accused of a crime, joins a ship, and he starts off poor, but has adventures away, and then comes back as a rich guy and proves his innocence and wins the girl. So basically,
there you go.
Ultimately becomes mayor of London several times. So we got together and wrote this script, and it was a real trial by fire. There was also various strictures because a lot of the people who were experienced in putting on pantomimes in this group had left. I knew I had to keep it very simple. I couldn't afford to have much in the way of elaborate set changes. So we basically had there was like a street scene and a ship scene and a foreign island, tropical island scene. And everything else, if I needed anything else, it had to happen in front of the curtains. So since, like most writers, I don't like blank pieces of paper, it actually helps that I in a way, I had a structure given to me. And then it becomes a bit of filling it in with these. And because you've got these characters and you sort of know who they are and how they should act, I knew it had to have. Weirdly, I changed the names. My script for Dick Whittington is a bit non-traditional. Normally, there's a villain called King Rat who lives in London, and I completely forgot about him. I completely forgot about King Rat and invented a new villain called Baroness Bedknobs. But it seemed to work okay, and it went down very well. To cut a long story short, pantomime was very well received. So the next year, I co-wrote Aladdin with a friend of mine called Adrian Baradell. And it was actually Adrian, and this went down very well, this Aladdin. And it was actually Adrian who said, "I think we should try and get this published," which I must admit I hadn't thought of doing. I thought this is just something I've written for a local theatre, and I hadn't really thought about getting it published. But bless Adrian, he kind of drove it and got in touch with Lazy Bee Scripts and submitted it, and they accepted it.
Nice.
And we carried on. We did Treasure Island the next year.
Wow.
And then we sort of went solo. We kind of, not because we've fallen out, we're still friends, I hasten to add. But after that, Adrian kind of wrote a couple on his own, and I wrote one on my own. I wrote Rumpelstiltskin on my own. Wow. And that went down well. And each time we submitted it to Lazy Bee Scripts. And obviously what we were writing went down, it sort of connected with Lazy Bee Scripts. Perfect. So they're probably, what's the thing I've earned the most money from to bring it down to such a base thing? It's my pantomimes, which are still regularly being put on by mostly British groups, but also one or two other theatre groups around the world have put those pantomimes on. So
Beautiful.
yeah,
That's very interesting. Now, in addition to your writing success, have you performed pantomime?
I have. Weirdly, I haven't performed pantomime. No, there was a slight crossover. I was in the Dick Whittington production. I played the Dame in
Okay.
that one. I've done most of the pantomime roles. I played Abanazar in an early production. He's the villain in Aladdin. And I've done there's usually a kind of comedy relief idiot sort of character. And I've he's usually called Silly Billy or Buttons if it's and I played this I might have been called Silly Billy. I was a kind of a jester. I was a useless jester in a production of Snow White. I always quite like my first joke, which I came in dragging this piece of rope behind me. And the evil queen says, "Why are you pulling that rope?" And I said, have you ever tried pushing one?
So how did you get? I didn't mean to go on so long about pantomime, but this is very interesting. I didn't know what your answers were going to be, so I didn't know what to expect. What got you interested in pantomime? Was it something that you just started to enjoy as your own? Was it your aunt that introduced you?
It was kind of my aunt who got me introduced. I never did it. Usually people they do it as kids because most pantomimes usually have a junior chorus.
Right.
And people's, but I'd never done that. I kind of went straight in on the adult side of it. And I do enjoy it when it's working. I must admit, producing pantomimes is usually a bit of a trauma, mostly because I prefer plays because with a play, you're there with like-minded adults, whereas a pantomime has a lot of children in it. And especially when it's probably different when you're doing a professional pantomime. But when you're doing a pantomime effectively for the local community, I think a lot of people tend to use it as childcare, basically. So it's much involved in crowd wrangling and constantly telling the kids to shut up. So they'd all be blah, 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 and playing games and then the phones and everything. So
that type of child care here started in I think 1960 with the Flintstones. so
it's kind of like that. But it is fun when you get it going well and you've got a good rapport with the audience. It's especially Abanazar. I think there's something because you get hissed and booed and you're shaking your fist and saying, you worms, I'm my revenge. That's all great fun. But and it's useful when it came to writing pantomimes. As much for what I liked and what I didn't like. There was stuff I've always you've got to have some romance. There's got to be a hero and a heroine and they have a wedding at the end. That's usually the way. But I know as a kid, I'd usually find that kind of love romance being a bit boring. So I tend to kind of cut that down to sort of like the bare minimum. Yeah.
All right. Well, we've reached question 10 of 15. So we're getting along here. Thanks for hanging in there.
That's all right.
Anytime you want to take a break or something, just let me know.
I think the voice will keep going a little bit longer.
Okay, very good. I'm hanging in there as well. So it seems like my coughing has finally stopped. My knees are getting a little bit stiff, but other than that, we're getting along good here, and this is so much fun and enjoyable.
Oh, thank you. It is. I'm enjoying it myself.
Some of you. I've only done 3 interviews now. You're the third, and what's very interesting that I'm learning is that I learn a lot. Go figure. Who would imagine that? So going back to the town of Bolton, I after Will had told me about Bolton, I went and Googled it, and I don't know if I went to Street View or what. I looked at a lot of pictures of Bolton, and it looks beautiful. And it seems like a lot of talent comes out of Bolton with you and Will,
Mm.
and probably others. And I think that the pantomime, the Bolton Little Theater sounds interesting.
Mm.
Did you, back to that? One more question about that. Did you say
Mm.
that they do an annual program in order to stay in
Yeah.
the black?
Yeah, I think for a lot of groups, including Bolton Little Theatre, they put on a regular pantomime. It tends to be the banker. It's the thing that basically draws in the money that they'll invest in other plays for the rest of the year.
So if that's an annual event, does the whole town come to it or something?
It is kind of like that. I mean, certainly in sort of like the smaller communities,
Right.
it is a real kind of community event. And in the case of Bolton Little Theatre, it tends to be because it's part of Christmas and Christmas's traditions. A lot of the kind of the cubs and the brownies, and you'll get a lot of mass bookings from people. And plus, pantomimes tend to have big casts, so that's a good thing because then you get all the families of all the children that are in it coming along to see it. And
Wow.
for a lot of for a lot of families, it is a part of Christmas. It is a seeing a pantomime is part of the Christmas tradition.
Beautiful. That sounds really nice. You know, back to writing and stories, I don't know understand why, but there's really nothing I love more than hearing of a success story. I mean, I don't know if it's interesting to everybody. Excuse me, maybe just me, but for some reason, I always find a writing success story to be the most awesome thing to hear about. And and then you have Will Hadcroft there in Bolton, where he achieved a lifetime goal of having his
Mm.
story published by BBC. And the Resurrection Plant is in a series called the BBC Doctor Who Audio Originals, and this is a series. It's if someone were to ask what is my favorite Doctor Who, it's that series right there.
Oh.
I love the television programs. Well, I would say that series and the television programs are probably
Mm.
equal. And then second would be Big Finish. And who
Mm.
doesn't love Big Finish? But there was another author, Andrew Lane, that wrote a story, The Scent of Blood, that came out in 2019. And
Mhm.
he seems like a very interesting author, and I would really like to interview him because when that story came out, it was his first story for the BBC Doctor Who audio originals. And I remember seeing him online somewhere interacting with some fans, and he was so excited that right there inspired me in a few ways where it made me think about what it would feel like to become a successful author, and
Mm.
and I think Andy Lane's excitement at his own story coming out is what has always been in the back of my mind that caused me to be interested in then ordering Will Hadcroft's book. So I guess I did exactly what BBC wanted me to do. When Andy Lane's story came out, The Scent of Blood, I enjoyed it so much that I automatically started to order every single one of those in that series. But with Will, it was outstanding. I'm so gracious to him for letting me interview
Mm.
him. Will took to social media and he started shouting out his name and his story title from the digital rooftops in a way that I've never really seen before. And he took it to a new level. And he's promoted his story modernly, digitally, uh, and presumably in a very successful manner. I hope to God that a ton of Doctor Who fans go and order his book, and I hope that BBC hires him again to write another one, as much
Mm.
as I hope BBC hires Andy Lane again to write
Mhm.
another one in that series. I want to see both of them back. But
Mm.
with Will, you produced a Doctor Who audio adventure, full
Mm.
cast. with him,
Mm.
which you did mention earlier,
Mm-hmm.
the cataph factor.
Yeah, there was always debate how you say this word. I call it kataf, but
Cataph. Okay.
kataf, kataf. It could be kataf, but
Well, I would have called it chataf had you,
ah,
but Will pronounced it a different way. So I tried to correct it to cataph. And then
yeah.
when you
I think
said
he
it
said
earlier,
a hard ch. But but I think we weren't. I remember there was a debate about it on the day of the recording. How this should be
how to
said.
pronounce it,
Unfortunately,
really.
Will wasn't with us, so
So, tell us a little bit about that production.
that came across. I was very happy. Will had been enjoying the Fine Line stuff and got in touch, and said, "Oh, I've written a story. Would you like to read it?" And it's always been my policy to say yes when people have been kind enough to get in touch. And in fact, Paul Phillips as well, who did a story called The Ultimate Soldier for us. That was another case he just kind of wrote in. So Will got in touch, and we started talking, exchanging emails, and he said, "Oh, I've got this story." I think he'd written episode 1, and he had the other 2 sort of plotted out. So he sent me it, and I really liked it. I gave him a few pointers. There were some bits where the dialogue seemed a bit stilted, and I sort of gave him some pointers. You got to make about how the dialogue could be made a little bit more naturalistic, and but really didn't have to change too much. I think there was only another bit. Funny enough, a friend of mine, Lawrence Alameyer, who works at the British Science Museum down in London. He's a Doctor Who fan, and he'd read it, and he has some pointers in episode 2. I think it has been a while since I've heard it myself. I think in episode 2, the Doctor and the chief mad scientist played by John Ainsworth, they have this kind of debate about evolution. And the way it was written initially, it seemed like the Doctor was bizarrely pushing a kind of anti-science thing that was wrong. It wasn't in his character. So I remember that scene, this big debate about evolution, which was in the story, is like this new theory of Charles Darwin. It's a story set in Victorian times.
Mm-hmm.
That was the scene that needed probably the most work on it. But it did arrive pretty much fully formed, and so it was relatively easy to get together a decent cast. Mostly people I've worked with before. I mean, obviously, I had my 2 regulars, Joe Binks, who played the Doctor, and Amy Elizabeth, who was playing his assistant. And as I said earlier, John Ainsworth in as the main chief villain, and 1 or 2 other sort of faces, including some friends from Westlake, from the Westlake group, got involved in this one. And it was a good experience. I think we largely did it all. I think we recorded it all in one day. It was all in my front room.
Really?
And,
that was all done in one day?
I think it was just about done. There might have been 1 or 2 pickup bits, but largely, because I think I had changed the way I worked. I used to do it, record and record, but it was actually faster to do 1 read through, and we kind of got any wrinkles out of the way, and I did most of my directing in that read through.
I would have never ever expected that was done in one day. That's a very interesting story, and after listening to that, I'm shocked. I would have thought it would take a month or something like that to produce that story.
The recording, the acting took. I mean, the post production took a lot longer. That always takes much longer. The post production of it, but no, it was a very busy. a long but fruitful day, that in terms of recording. So yeah, it was generally a happy experience, a very happy. It was a nice one. It wasn't intended to be the last Fine Line story, but
Right.
fate decreed it is, and it's quite a good one to go out on.
Well, talk about going out with a bang. I hope it's not the last. I'd like to see another one in the Fine Line series in the future.
That's very kind. There are one or two scripts that were, they're sitting on my hard drive. So
well, you know what? Finish them. Like
Yeah.
Georgia Cook says.
That is very wise.
She gives good advice. Okay, so for viewers or listeners, this interview will be released on YouTube. It might come out as an audio only podcast somewhere. So for viewers or listeners, that story that we were just discussing is on YouTube right now. And it is I call it the Catath factor. So just go to YouTube, type in Doctor Who, and then this word CHATTATH factor, and you can listen to that story. All three parts are on YouTube right now, and thank you, Gareth, for that. That's much appreciated.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for putting it up.
Yes, sir. Okay, so back to the subject of, probably for the last time today, back to the subject of self-promotion by writers on modern day social media. Can you tell us a bit how you feel about that and writers and artists in general? Do you believe that social media has value in promoting themselves better in 2022 and beyond? And do you know anybody that doesn't use it?
I do actually, but actually generally I'd say it is a good thing, and especially in the early days, it is a good way of kind of getting yourself out there. You were talking about Will. I think Will does it absolutely right in that he doesn't just send out tweets saying, buy my book or listen to my book in his case. He also engages quite a bit. I think that's the thing about social media. You've got to engage with other people and try and build up a bit of a relationship with your audience. I think, and that will get people more interested in what you got to say when you do come to plugging your stuff. So, and so I think there's definitely a role for social media. You don't have to do it. There are some writers I know who don't have a media presence of their own at all. A good friend of mine, Rick Hoskin, who's a very successful writer. He's Are
you talking about Rick Hoskin, spelled R-I-K?
Yeah, R-I-K. Yes.
Yeah.
He's written loads of mediums. He started as a comic book writer, moved into novels. He's written for video games, and
I was looking at the massive amount of accomplishments.
Oh yeah, but he doesn't have any kind of social media accounts at all. He relies on other people, including myself, to kind of do the plugging and kind of, or the companies that he's working for. Obviously, he expects them to be plugging their own material. But
that sounds nice and relaxing.
Yeah, it is. Oh, you're quite right. To do it properly, it's almost a full-time job in itself.
Yeah.
I found that. Yeah. Trying to do marketing for Bolton Little Theatre, that could easily, you could just spend all day just doing that if you really wanted to do it. So I think the important thing is to remember you're talking to people. I think, and don't just go. The worst thing you can do is to keep popping up on forums and Facebook groups and just saying, "Buy my book," or listen to my podcast, and then they never hear from you again, basically. So you've got to engage in the places where you decide to promote yourself.
Okay, so in referencing the two previous interviews that I've had a lifetime honor of being able to do, with Will Hadcroft and Georgia Cook, um, who were at the time, actually, I think they still are the most recent BBC Doctor Who and Big Finish Doctor Who authors.
Mm.
I'm pretty sure. I think that they both are still right now. One question that I asked each of them, and I think I'm going to make this a staple question,
Mm.
was how they dealt with rejection. And if people have not noticed by now, if there's anyone in the world that has watched all three of these interviews that I've done now, they've probably been able to realize that these interviews are intended to be inspirational towards people that might want to try writing.
Mm.
And they're intended to include information that would inspire people and make them realize that if that's what they want to do, that they can. Okay.
Mm.
But it's not all about success, because, that would be a fairy tale story. That certainly writing involves a downside, such as rejection.
Mm.
And there's one thing I've learned is that when in speaking with other authors, and it's that you don't always get that rejection letter that tells you why.
Mm.
So how have you experienced rejection when it comes to your writing or otherwise creative content, and how did you deal with it?
I certainly have. And like I said, it's almost a bonus if you do get a rejection letter, because
Because you
quite
can learn
often
from
I've
it.
submitted stuff and it's just kind of disappeared into the ether and never
Right,
heard anything more about
right.
it. But I think probably the best thing you can do with rejection is try and learn from it.
Okay.
And I think if you kind of stick your head in the sand and think, no, I wrote the best Doctor Who story ever. How dare they not see my genius? I think that is a very counterproductive kind of attitude. So, because I've been rejected, I've tried to submit stuff to Big Finish and
Mhm.
to the Virgin Publishing when they were doing Doctor Who: The New Adventures,
Mhm.
and I've submitted other sort of just original novels over the years, and also there was a time the BBC were trying to inviting new writers to write for their daytime TV sort of drama slot. So again, I wrote that and got a nice letter back saying
I
that,
was just going to ask that.
yeah, that I'd
Was
got to
just
the short list, but in the end, no, so it just
okay.
wasn't quite what that phrase, not what they were looking for at that
Okay.
time.
So, have you seen multiple instances of form rejection letters?
The only real form that was actually from Virgin Publishing for
Okay.
actually, I mean, they were very blatant about it. They sent me a rejection letter and they had a form with a lot of the most common mistakes that people make, and they just sort of, and check boxes, and they just
Right.
sort of tick the check boxes against the ones. I think in mine it was my characterization of the regulars wasn't good enough, and
Okay.
by and they didn't think my basic idea was original enough.
But
So
wow, how terrible. That seems so impersonal, with check boxes but I guess you can learn from it. So
that's all you can do, and pick yourself up and try again.
just keep
And
going. Okay.
yeah,
Now,
that's it.
did Big Finish send you a rejection letter, or was
I
that
got a
something that
nice
just
email. I got a nice email off them because they do this. They do an annual competition called the Paul Spragg um,
yes,
competition for someone to write a short story, basically.
right.
And I got a nice email back, sort of like saying it's you good. You kind of you caught the style of the era, but it's not quite. I think they thought it was a bit too complicated. I think I tried to. It was like a novel compressed into a short story. So, which I think is a bit of an error. Short story writing is kind of a skill in itself,
Right.
really.
Wow,
And
that's Wow, what a shame. I wish that they had accepted yours. That would have been awesome. I
Oh,
can't
really?
imagine how many stories people submit to them. I don't know whether it's hundreds or thousands, but
I think it is in the
uh,
thousands. And to be honest, the winning stories, when I've listened to them, I've always kind of thought, yeah, that's a good story. I can see why
yeah,
that won, you know.
yeah, exactly. I enjoy that series. Do you plan on submitting for another one? I think it's open now. The Paul
Oh, well,
Spragg.
if it's open now, it's probably a bit too. I do intend to. Maybe
Yeah,
I
I
will
think
start
if
and.
I'm not mistaken, I think I hope I'm not saying this and causing somebody to get excited when it's not true. But I think the Paul Spragg Memorial story contest, if that's even what it's called, yeah, I'm pretty
I
sure
think
that's
it's
open
still
for
so.
submissions.
Oh,
And
well, in
then
that
that story
case,
will be
I
out
will
in
have to check.
December. Yeah, and I think it's for a story to be released this December.
Mm,
So that's an interesting place to find brand new writers.
mm. That
If
is,
you're
that's good. It's just looking for opportunities because there are a lot of short stories. In fact, a bit of advice I really need to give myself is to have build up a bit of a library of stuff ready to go, sort of
that's
short stories.
another thing that Georgia Cook said,
Mm-hmm.
building a library or portfolio. Yeah,
I
building.
think that is very important. So I've got a
Yeah.
bit of a portfolio, but you could definitely do with adding a bit more to it.
Okay. So well, your name is already down in Doctor Who history forever. Congratulations for that. That
Oh,
is
thank you.
it's amazing. And what would you say to other perhaps younger people or aspiring writers or aspiring content creators? I guess I guess a technical content creator today could be considered a Doctor Who fan on YouTube. If they're
Mm.
not creating content, I don't know what is. But what would you say to encourage or inspire these people?
Yeah. I think the first thing I say is just do it. Writing, the writing, like most things in life, you learn by doing, basically.
Right,
So it's
right.
important to write. And secondly, I would say it's very important to listen to Georgia Cook, who's an
Yeah,
absolute
yeah, no doubt.
mine
You
of
know
great
what?
information.
I think what I need to do is I need to readdress her interview and come up with about another 15 questions and get with her and see if I can re-interview her again. You're not the first person that said that. Someone else said that they want to see more of Georgia Cook on the interviews. So okay, we're getting near the end here.
Mhm.
This interview would not be complete without addressing the elephant on the living room couch, and I believe you folks call that a sofa. Do you recall the very first Doctor Who episode that you ever watched, and who is your doctor?
I do. It was Carnival of Monsters, episode one. That's my first clear memory. My memory is there's a moment near the start of that story where this orderly jumps up and he's making a rabble rousing speech and he gets shot. So almost out of hand by one of the officers, one of the kind of rulers, and that really scared me. I don't know why it really, but in a story that's got dressage on it, I think the dressage scared me as well. But that almost kind of cold-blooded killing really kind of shook me up, and that's my first memory. In terms of my doctor, I think it has to be Tom Baker because
Right.
he's the doctor I grew up with. I started with Pertwee, but Tom Baker is the doctor,
Yeah.
in those key formative years,
Right.
and he's a it's a continually surprising performance.
Yeah. Same with me. It's Tom Baker. Because I had gotten bored watching Star Trek in the 1980s because I had seen there was only 3 seasons of it, and I had already seen every episode about 5 times, and I think I had the scripts memorized, and I got just tired of it, burned out. And I remember looking through a paper magazine, which was called TV Guide here, Back before the internet, it was pretty much the only way you could find out what was going to be on TV. So when you needed to be sitting on your couch or sofa to catch that stuff. And I remember looking for science fiction and seeing something called Doctor Who. And I thought, okay, well, maybe that's like Star Trek. I'll watch that. And it was on a PBS channel. And the first episode I ever watched was called The Horror of Fang Rock. And it was just so dark and so creepy. And that fuzzy haired guy was he funny or was he being sarcastic? I wasn't quite sure. And then of course Layla, you know, when you're a teenage boy and all of a sudden you see that beautiful actor there, it was instantly very interesting, beyond interesting. It was extremely intriguing. And of course, that was the Tom Baker era. So you and I have the same doctor. Now, I was going to ask you, do you remember watching the Russell T Davies reboot with Rose? But you've already answered that. So we're going to skip that question. But it did bring me back to something I wanted to ask you earlier, and I forgot to. You said that you and a group of friends videoed yourselves watching Rose for the first time and doing some commentaries.
Recorded ourselves, yes.
The audio recorded?
It's an audio recording.
It's an audio.
A talented friend of mine kind of produced these DVDs, you know, with Rose on it and our commentary.
Oh, nice.
Like an optional audio track.
Is that online now? Or
it's not? No, I don't think it'll ever go online because I think you need to get the permission of everybody.
Okay, yeah, because it would be copyright infringement if you put Rose online. I could see somebody doing that on accident, but I don't know how somebody would do that because BBC owns Rose, obviously.
No, I think it'd be more to get the permission of everyone who is in that commentary.
In the commentary. Okay. So I wonder how it would be released without actually releasing Rose.
It's just kind of a memento, really.
I guess someone would have to watch Rose and then listen to this at the same time. But,
I think some people have done that audio commentary. I can't remember. The bit that always stays with me is my friend. Actually, I mentioned Amy Elizabeth as this because there's that bit at the start, and she, wow, Rose wakes up and she's already got her makeup on. And,
yeah.
And there's somebody else.
That's right.
Yeah, and somebody else. Well, when your day goes as fast as this, you have to.
That's funny. Okay, so as the Jodie Whittaker era wraps up, and we have the 60th anniversary specials coming up, and we have a new doctor, an exciting and talented actor, Ncuti Gatwa. I call him, and I've coined him as Cutie Gatwa since he is. And since I first saw his name, I thought that's how it was pronounced. And I was accidentally saying Cutie Gatwa until somebody corrected me, but I think I'll just keep that. So Russell T Davies is returning, which is just beyond awesome. How do you feel about the current state of Doctor Who? And are you excited?
I'm very excited. I'm feeling very positive about. I can't wait to see what this all about. I'm looking forward to October and Jodie's final story, and the specials that have been that Russell's film. And I must admit, I know nothing about Ncuti at all. I never watched Sex Education or anything else that he's been in, so it's going to be a complete surprise to me. You know, similarly with Matt Smith, I don't think I'd ever seen Matt Smith in anything before he came on, and he's my favorite of the new series doctors. So I'm feeling very, 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 very positive about it.
Okay. That's interesting that you have not watched Sex Education. I almost accidentally said Sex in the City, but Sex Education. There's never been a new Doctor actor that I've ever heard of in my life, and it could be because I'm not British. Because I think that when Peter Capaldi became the Doctor, from what I understood of reading fan reactions online, people already knew who he was, and I had never heard of him. So with Shuti Gatwa, as always, I had never heard of him. So
Mm.
after he was announced, um, I immediately got online and went to the wiki to find out who this person is and find out what they've been involved in. So I did go watch Sex Education.
Hmm.
I haven't seen all of it yet. I might actually binge watch an entire series. But from what I've seen so far, he is an outstanding actor,
Mm.
and it's going to be really good. I'm excited about it, and I think uh, with Russell T Davies, I think that the Jodie Whittaker era has been lacking in incidental music, and
Mm.
I don't believe that that is the fault of the composer. I think it was just a poor direction that BBC went, where they're sort of intentionally emulating modern television, where
Mm.
instead of it having exciting incidental music, think Murray Gold,
Mm.
exciting incidental music, instead of having that, it has this ooh, ooh, this deep undulating, almost
Mm.
depressing tone to it. And I'm not faulting the current music producer at all, because I
Mm.
believe they're doing exactly what was ordered. BBC
Mm.
said, we want this, and he produced that. And I'm hoping that Russell T Davies brings back Doctor Who in music at the
Mm.
same time in the Shuti Gatwa era, where you have exciting, uh,
Mm.
uh, just loud, fast, enjoyable music. I'm hoping
Mm.
that that happens. How do you important do you believe it is for music in Doctor Who?
Oh, music's very important in any kind of film or TV drama. Now, I mean, Murray Gold has been amazingly versatile over the years. I must admit, I was quite, now, how I pronounce his name, Sigun Akinola.
You're right.
Um,
See, that's why I didn't say his name. I know how to pronounce Akinola. Um, I think it's Seguin or
Seguin.
Seguin or something like that. Um,
Seguin. And now
yeah,
I
I
quite liked his sort of, because having grown up in that kind of 80s, 70s, 80s, when the Radiophonic Workshop were doing it,
right.
and I quite like that he was kind of harking back to that kind of more electronic music kind of sound.
You think so?
Uh, yeah, so
You think so?
no, I mean, it's true. He doesn't do those big memorable themes. I couldn't hum you anything from
Right.
his era, whereas I could, do. There's a few Murray Gold. He's very much a melody man. He can,
Right.
and there's that. Yeah, I won't try doing one now, but he does melodies, and yeah. Whereas the Jodie Whittaker era it is more atmospherics,
Right.
but I quite like that.
Well, I probably need to go listen to his soundtrack again because uh I am not criticizing Seguin Akinola. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. It's awesome that he was able to work on Doctor Who. I didn't want to slaughter his name, but by attempting to say it and not knowing how it's pronounced, I still don't know how it's pronounced, and
Well, I think you did a
that's
better job than me. I think.
well, that's one of the things about the internet era is that it's so much text. It's easy to read something and think that it's pronounced a different way. Like with me and Sophie, I thought her name was Sophie Aldred until I actually really realized she herself is saying Aldred. It's one of those situations, and I believe that Seguin or Seguin, and if you see this again, I'm very sorry for not knowing how to pronounce your name, but the I believe he delivered exactly what BBC ordered, and it was not to my liking the direction that
Mm.
it went. Maybe I'm just more of a fan of Murray Gold.
Yes,
Now,
probably.
the opening title sequence, however, is probably the my favorite. It's probably the best
Ah,
one that's ever been done. And if people haven't heard that on a very high end stereo system, they should. Have you
Mm.
heard that opening theme on a stereo system that has a
I don't think I've
subwoofer?
heard it on a really. I've just tended to hear it on the TV, which is a kind of
Right.
standard TV. But it is. I do like his take on it. That theme. Yes, I did like it. I think it's better than the Peter Capaldi one. I think, which suffers. There's something a bit tinny going on in that Peter Capaldi version. It doesn't quite
Yeah.
work
Yeah.
for me.
Tinny.
Yeah.
I can see that. That's a good way of describing it. Okay, well, we're wrapping up here, and one of the last things I wanted to ask you was, where can people find you these days? And I know the answer. I know. Tell us about the podcast, which is called Talking Pictures TV.
Well, first off, probably the best place you want to find out more about me is go to garethpreston.blog, and
Dot
it's
blog.
got all Gareth Preston, one word,
Uh-huh.
dot blog, and that's
Dot
my blog.
blog.
Yeah,
Dot blog, not dot com. Okay.
no,
So,
that's
and we're gonna put that URL on the end
okay.
here also.
And that's probably because that's got everything on it, all the different things I've done, and most of the things I've done in the past, the ones that I want people to know about, and latest news and reviews and stuff. I'm also a regular reviewer on Talking Pictures TV podcast. It's an independent television station. It's the most successful one. It's a beautiful family-run TV station. So it has this real personality of its own. And they show lots of old films and old bits of old TV. And they have a podcast promoting it. And I'm on there reviewing
Really?
at the moment, I've been reviewing The Outer Limits, which they've been showing, the original 60s Outer Limits. So I'm reviewing that at the moment.
Wait a second.
And
Okay, this is very surprising. You're telling me you are reviewing The Outer Limits on television?
not on television. It's an audio podcast.
Audio. Okay.
So I'm reviewing them like the next three stories that are, it's always a preview of what's coming in the next 3 weeks. So, and I
Okay.
get sent, so they send out the reviewers a list of what's coming, and we kind of pick a film we want to talk about. But recently, I've been just doing Outer Limits and talking
That's
about
very
that
interesting.
marvelous series. And I've enjoyed that so much, it's inspired me to start off my own podcast, which is called Very British Futures. And
Exactly.
available
Exactly.
on all good podcasting platforms. And it's about British television science fiction. And when I started it because there are certain shows like Doctor Who and Red Dwarf and The Prisoner and Blake Seven, and they got loads of podcasts. I couldn't tell you how many Doctor Who podcasts are out there. Really, there's probably over 100. But I felt, well, there's lots of other shows, more obscure or whatever, that deserve talking about as well. So that's what this podcast is about. And myself and 2 or 3 friends, we get together. We've all hopefully watched some of it and been inviting. And it's nice. I've been getting 1 or 2 people who I've never actually spoken to before, but I've invited them along and they've said yes. Excuse me. And it's a bit similar to this conversation, as it's fairly kind of positive and informed.
Okay.
So that's basically what it's going to. I didn't want it to be too snarky. I didn't want it to be a kind of I felt there's a lot of stuff out there, and some of it's very funny of people,
Right.
and they go
Right.
very everything that's wrong with this, and there's lots of, and I wanted to do something that was a bit more celebratory and appreciative. So
Nice. Very nice.
so that's
Yeah.
very British. We've done 12 so far, and I'm editing a couple more at the moment. You're saying about
Okay.
I don't know, you might want to cut this, but you were saying about pronouncing people's names. We went through a whole, because we've just talked about a British science fiction series called The Aliens, which has
Mm-hmm.
a marvelous actor called Michael We decided to call him Michael Socher, but we went into a big. Is it Michael Socher? Is it Socher? Is it Soka? Is it so? But we
because you only had the text to go on and had not heard another person pronounce it before, right?
Yeah.
Right.
That is the thing. So and the internet didn't help because that pronounced his name in two different ways as well. So
right. That's an odd phenomenon there. Very British futures. Okay, so we're gonna wrap it up here. And thank you for surviving for 3 hours. Thank you for letting me cough in your ear for 3 hours. And I hope that
I hope it's been good. I hope it's. I hope it is inspiring and informative.
It is. You are a very, very interesting person to talk to, and I have learned a lot. And we're going to put links to Talking Pictures TV and Very British Futures on the ending title cards as well. And
thank you very much.
And Mr. Preston, I enjoyed your works decades ago. And when I met you on Twitter, I had to go back and realize, okay, that's who this is. And I've seen this and I've listened to that. And there was no such thing as video chat back when I was first exposed to your works. In fact, I don't think that there was the internet yet, at least in its modern form. There may have been modems and bulletin board systems, but I would have never imagined that at some time in the future that I would be given an opportunity to interview you on video chat on the internet in 2022, and allow that to inspire other people. I would have never imagined, and I'm shocked and I'm honored and I very much appreciate it. And thank you for working together with me on an interview which is intended to educate, entertain, and hopefully inspire. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you very much. That's very gracious. I've enjoyed it a lot. And thank you for all the hard work you put into it, researching it, and excellent questions. And well, I'm sure we will talk again beyond this.
Very well. Very well. Thank you so much again. And have a nice evening.
And to you. Bye for now.
Bye for now.